I remember the ache, the gnawing internal pressure that demanded action. It wasn't about a specific stock, a chart pattern, or a news headline. It was the silence. The unbearable, suffocating silence of waiting, of doing nothing, when every fiber of my being screamed to do something. I'd sit there, watching the screen, the market moving, and feel the primal urge to jump in to prove I was alive, that I was a trader, that I wasn't missing out. That was my error, my profound, repeated mistake, believing that to be active was to be productive, that cash sitting idle was a wasted opportunity. The price I paid for that delusion was steep, etched into my memory with the acid of regret. Countless trades forced out of impatience, out of a desperate need to feel engaged. Small losses that compounded into significant drains, not just on my capital, but on my spirit. Each hurried entry, each impulsive exit, chipped away at my confidence, leaving me hollowed out, questioning my own judgment. I wasn't just losing money. I was losing belief in myself, caught in a vicious cycle where the fear of missing out led to bad trades, which led to bigger fears, and then more impulsive actions. The market became a battlefield, where my greatest enemy wasn't the price action, but the relentless internal chatter, the incessant demand for immediate gratification. I was a puppet to my own emotions, a slave to the market's constant hum, desperate for the next hit of dopamine, the brief illusion of control. The cost wasn't just financial. It was the slow, agonizing erosion of my peace of mind, the constant companion of anxiety, and the crushing weight of knowing I was my own undoing. Then, the truth, whispered from the past, echoed through my own painful experiences. Cash is a position. It wasn't just a phrase from Jesse Livermore. It was an epiphany, a fundamental shift in perception that cut through the noise. Waiting isn't passivity. It is, in fact, the most active, disciplined, and powerful position a trader can take. It's the conscious, deliberate choice to preserve capital, to protect mental clarity, and to deny the market the satisfaction of preying on your impatience. It's the strength to stand apart, to observe, to allow the perfect setup to materialize, rather than chasing shadows. The silence I once dreaded became my ally, a testament to my newfound discipline. It's in that stillness that genuine opportunities reveal themselves, not to the hurried, but to the patient, to those who have mastered the art of doing nothing until the moment demands everything. This isn't about hope. It's about the hard-earned understanding that control isn't found in constant action, but in deliberate inaction, in the profound wisdom of waiting. This realization transformed my relationship with the market, and, more importantly, with myself. The fear of missing out gave way to the quiet confidence of knowing I was waiting for the right opportunity, not any opportunity. I learned that true consistency wasn't about the number of trades, but the quality of them. The market no longer felt like a casino demanding my constant participation, but a landscape presenting specific high-probability scenarios to those with the discipline to wait. I found redemption not in winning back what I lost, but in reclaiming my mental sovereignty, in understanding that the greatest trade I could ever make was the one I didn't make. This is the profound, liberating truth that Livermore embodied, the power of patience, the strategic genius of holding cash as a formidable position, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And so, my fellow traders, if you've felt that same gnawing unease, that same desperate urge to act when the market offers no clear path, know this, you are not alone. I've walked that path of self-inflicted wounds. The redemption you seek isn't found in a magic indicator or a secret strategy, but in the brutal honesty of facing your own mind, of embracing the discipline that separates the consistent from the chaotic. The greatest strength in trading isn't in what you do, but in what you choose not to do. The silence of waiting isn't a void. It's the fertile ground where true wealth, both financial and psychological, is cultivated. No more chasing, no more forcing, no more succumbing to the market's psychological warfare. From this day forward, let your cash be a position, a fortress of patience, a testament to your unwavering discipline. Therefore, if this resonates with the quiet struggles you've faced, if you recognize the cost of impatience in your own journey, I urge you to reflect on this truth. This isn't just about trading. It's about mastering yourself. No loose ends remain, only the stark reality of choice. Succumb to the chaos, or embrace the discipline. The answer lies within the strength to wait. In the end, the market teaches us the hard lessons, but the greatest teacher is ourselves. This journey, from impulse to discipline, from loss to clarity, is the true path to consistency. Deliberate act of self-control, a strategic retreat from the chaos, not out of fear, but out of profound respect for the market's true nature. I learned to see the empty space in my portfolio, the uncommitted capital, not as a void to be filled, but as a reservoir of potential, a loaded spring held taut, waiting for the precise moment of release. This wasn't inaction, it was preparation. It was the sustained effort of observation without interference, the quiet accumulation of knowledge without the pressure of immediate engagement. The market would churn, others would chase fleeting opportunities. Their screens, a flurry of green and red, their emotions, a tempest. I would sit still, I would watch, I would listen. Not to the noise, but to the underlying currents, the subtle shifts, the whispers of genuine opportunity. This discipline was forged in the crucible of past mistakes. Each loss, each moment of self-recrimination, became a teacher. I had to unlearn the ingrained habit of reactivity. I had to dismantle the insidious belief that my worth as a trader was tied to my trading frequency. The hardest lesson was accepting that often, the most profitable action is no action at all. It requires immense strength to resist the siren call of apparent movement, to ignore the taunts of the market that seem to mock your stillness. But in that stillness, a clarity emerges. The emotional fog dissipates. The desperate urge to participate recedes, replaced by a calm, analytical perspective. Cash, I realized, was freedom. It was the ultimate optionality. It granted me the power to choose, not to react. It allowed me to dictate my terms to the market, instead of being dictated by its whims. When I held cash, I held power. I held the ability to enter a trade from a position of strength, not desperation. I could wait for the setup to be perfect, for the confluence of factors to align with undeniable precision. I could demand that the market present me with an undeniable edge, a high-probability scenario, before committing a single dollar. This waiting was not passive. It was an aggressive stance, a declaration of independence from the market's incessant demands. The best trades, I discovered, were often those I almost missed because I was too busy waiting. But the waiting itself ensured that when I did act, it was with conviction, with a deep understanding of the risk and reward. It was the difference between a panicked sprint and a carefully aimed shot. The pressure to act, that old familiar ache, it never completely vanished. It merely transformed. It became a signal, a warning. When that primal urge to do something arose, I learned to pause, to question it. Was this a genuine opportunity, or merely my impatience masquerading as insight? More often than not, it was the latter. To wait for days, as Livermore understood, is to embrace a different temporal reality. The daily fluctuations, the hourly swings, they become mere noise. Your focus shifts to the larger trend, the significant move, the truly impactful event. You are no longer chasing pennies. You are positioning for dollars. This requires a profound shift in mindset, a reorientation of one's entire approach to the market. It means accepting that your capital might sit idle for extended periods, generating no immediate return. But during that dormancy, it is gathering strength, preserving itself, preparing for its moment. It is the disciplined warrior, sharpening his blade, conserving his energy, knowing that the battle will come, and he must be ready, not exhausted by skirmishes. The emotional intensity of the market, which once consumed me, now flowed around me. I was no longer caught in its currents. I had found my anchor. The fear of missing out, the FOMO, it had been replaced by the confidence of knowing I was preserving my capital for the right opportunity, not any opportunity. This distinction was everything. It separated the amateur, driven by impulse, from the professional, guided by principle. It was the difference between gambling and strategic allocation. I stopped trying to predict every twist and turn. Instead, I focused on recognizing the patterns that truly mattered, the ones that offered a clear, asymmetric advantage. And if those patterns weren't present, I did nothing. My inaction became my most powerful tool. It was a shield against self-inflicted wounds, a filter against the market's endless distractions. The market is always there. It will always offer another chance. But your capital, your emotional resilience, these are finite resources. To squander them on mediocre setups is an act of self-sabotage. The clarity that came from this deliberate patience was astounding. Decisions became less fraught with anxiety, more grounded in logic. The internal chatter, once deafening, quieted to a manageable hum. I learned to trust my own judgment, not because I was always right, but because I had built a framework of discipline that allowed me to act only when the odds were demonstrably in my favor. This wasn't about being perfect. It was about being patient, about respecting the process, about understanding that true opportunity often reveals itself only to those who are willing to wait for it, without compromise, without haste. This patience was not a passive virtue, it was a weapon. It allowed me to see through the market's illusions, to distinguish genuine setups from mere noise. The constant urge to be involved, that internal tremor, it slowly receded. It was replaced by a quiet strength, an unshakable resolve to act only when the conditions were undeniably favorable. This meant accepting long periods of inactivity, days, even weeks, where my capital remained uncommitted. Some called it laziness. I knew it was the highest form of discipline. It was the refusal to gamble, the commitment to intelligent speculation. The market, in its ceaseless motion, presents countless opportunities that are not, in fact, opportunities for me. They are traps for the impatient, distractions for the unfocused. My task was to filter, to discard, to ignore the vast majority of what unfolded on the screen. I learned to recognize the subtle cues that signaled a true confluence of factors. Price action confirming underlying strength or weakness, volume supporting the move, the broader market context aligning. It was a quiet accumulation of evidence, a meticulous building of a case, rather than a frantic leap of faith. And if the evidence was not overwhelming, if there was any doubt, I simply did nothing. The cost of inaction, I discovered, was far less than the cost of premature action. This transformation was not without its battles. The old habits, deeply ingrained, would surface unexpectedly. The whispers of FOMO would still try to penetrate my resolve. But now, I had a counter-argument, a framework of principles to lean on. I had the memory of past losses, the stark lessons etched into my financial and emotional ledger. These were not just cautionary tales. They were the pillars of my new discipline. Each time the urge to act impulsively arose, I would revisit those memories, feel the sting of past regrets, and reaffirm my commitment to patience. It was a constant internal dialogue, a vigilant guard against my own weaknesses. The concept of position took on a new dimension. Cash wasn't just money. It was a state of readiness. It was the tactical advantage of having dry powder when others were overextended. It was the ability to deploy capital precisely where and when it would have the maximum impact, rather than being forced to chase. This gave me an immense psychological edge. I no longer felt pressured by the market's pace. I dictated my own. The market moved at its speed. I moved at mine. This detachment from the immediate frenzy allowed for a clearer perspective, a wider lens through which to view the unfolding drama of supply and demand. I understood that true wealth in trading wasn't built on frequent small wins, but on patiently waiting for significant moves, for the big wave. It meant letting go of the need to capture every ripple. It meant accepting that much of the market's daily activity was irrelevant to my objectives. My focus became surgical, my entries precise, my exits calculated. The emotional roller coaster flattened. The highs were less ecstatic, the lows less devastating. There was a quiet confidence, a steady hand that came from knowing I was playing my own game, by my own rules, dictated by a deep understanding of market mechanics and, more importantly, human psychology, my own included. The market is a relentless teacher, but it teaches only those willing to listen, willing to adapt. My greatest lessons came not from reading charts, but from reading myself, from confronting the deep-seated fears and desires that drove my initial, disastrous forays. The waiting, the stillness, became a form of meditation. It was in those quiet moments, observing without participating, that I truly began to understand the rhythm of the market, its cycles of expansion and contraction, its moments of clarity, and its periods of deliberate obfuscation. This understanding was not theoretical. It was visceral, born from patient observation. This approach demanded a profound shift in ego. The need to be right all the time, to prove my intelligence, to be seen as active and successful. All of it had to be shed. Success was redefined. It was no longer about the quantity of trades, but the quality. It was about preserving capital, minimizing risk, and maximizing opportunity when it finally presented itself with undeniable force. It was about surviving the long game, not winning every skirmish. This humility, born from repeated failure, became my greatest asset. It allowed me to admit when I didn't know, when the picture was unclear, and therefore, when the best course of action was simply to do nothing at all. To wait, truly wait, is to embrace uncertainty with open eyes. It is to accept that the future is unknowable, and that precision in timing is a myth. But it is also to understand that certain conditions dramatically increase the odds in your favor. My job was not to predict the future, but to recognize these conditions, these moments of asymmetric risk and reward, and then to act decisively. The preparation, the discipline of waiting, made that decisive action possible. It wasn't impulsive. It was the culmination of sustained, quiet work. It was the quiet accumulation of power, ready to be unleashed. The power I spoke of, it was not aggressive in the conventional sense. It was the power of refusal. The refusal to be drawn into the market's incessant churn. The refusal to chase, to speculate wildly. This refusal was a conscious choice, a declaration of sovereignty over my own capital, my own mind. It meant standing firm against the psychological warfare the market wages daily. The subtle provocations designed to erode patience and trigger impulsive reactions. I learned to distinguish between genuine market conviction and the manufactured urgency of noise. The difference was often subtle, but critical. One led to profit, the other to regret. This newfound power allowed me to define my battleground. I no longer fought on every front. I chose my engagements with the precision of a master strategist. Each entry became a deliberate invasion, backed by overwhelming evidence, positioned for maximum impact. My capital was not scattered across a dozen uncertain ventures. It was concentrated, a spearhead aimed at a single well-researched target. This concentration of force, born from periods of prolonged inactivity, was devastatingly effective. When the conditions aligned, the uncertainty diminished, and the path became clear. My commitment was absolute. There was no hesitation, no second guessing, because the decision had been forged in the crucible of patient observation. The market, to most, is a casino, a chaotic scramble. To me, it transformed into a landscape of probabilities. My role was not to gamble, but to identify those rare instances where the odds were overwhelmingly skewed in my favor. This required a cold, dispassionate analysis, unclouded by hope or fear. The emotional distance I gained by waiting allowed for this clarity. I saw setups others missed, not because they lacked intelligence, but because their vision was obscured by the constant need to be in the market. They were too close to the canvas to see the full picture. Risk, too, underwent a fundamental redefinition. It was no longer something to be avoided at all costs, but a factor to be precisely managed, understood, and embraced when the potential reward justified it. My waiting periods were not just for identifying opportunities. They were for meticulously dissecting the associated risks. What was the worst-case scenario? How much capital was truly at stake? What was my exit strategy if the market proved me wrong? These questions were answered long before a single share was bought. This premeditation transformed risk from a terrifying unknown into a calculated variable. It stripped away the emotional charge, leaving only logic. The discipline of waiting allowed me to internalize the concept of opportunity cost in a profound way. Every trade I didn't take, every impulse I resisted, was not a missed opportunity, but a preservation of capital and mental energy for a superior one. This reframing was crucial. It shifted my perspective from scarcity, the fear of missing out on the current move, to abundance, the certainty that the market would always present another better chance if I was prepared to wait for it. My capital, sitting idle, was not dead money. It was living potential, appreciating in value by simply being available for the right moment. This wasn't about being perfectly prescient. It was about being perfectly present when the conditions were right. It meant being fully engaged mentally, even during periods of apparent inactivity. My mind was sharp, focused, constantly scanning, analyzing, filtering. The quiet was not emptiness. It was a fertile ground for deep thought and strategic planning. I was actively engaged in non-action, a paradox that defined my new approach. The market's constant movement was merely data, not a directive. The internal struggles never entirely ceased. The ego still whispered, tempting me to prove myself, to show how clever I was. But now, I had an answer. I had the undeniable evidence of past failures, the undeniable peace of current discipline. My ego had been humbled by the market, forged anew in the fires of patience. It now served me, rather than dictated to me. It understood that true mastery lay not in constant engagement, but in discerning restraint. This restraint extended beyond just trade entries. It informed my exits. Just as I waited patiently to enter, I learned to wait patiently to exit, allowing winning trades to run, cutting losing trades swiftly without emotional attachment. The same principles applied. Dispassionate analysis, adherence to a plan, refusal to be swayed by fleeting emotions. My patience became a shield against greed and fear, the twin destroyers of trading capital. The market's true rhythm became audible to me, not through its daily noise, but through its deeper, slower pulse. I began to see the underlying forces, the long-term trends, the significant reversals, almost before they fully formed. This wasn't magic. It was the cumulative effect of countless hours of patient, detached observation. I was no longer trying to catch every fish in the sea. I was waiting for the whales, and when a whale appeared, I was ready, my harpoon sharpened, my aim true. This liberation from the need to constantly act was profoundly freeing. My sense of self was no longer entangled with my trading performance. Losses, when they inevitably occurred, were no longer personal affronts. They were simply data points, lessons to be integrated, not wounds to fester. The emotional burden lifted, replaced by a quiet confidence that transcended individual trade outcomes. I had found a way to engage with the market, not as a desperate gambler, but as a detached observer, a strategic participant whose greatest strength lay in the power of conscious inaction. This was the ultimate realization. My control came not from manipulating the market, but from mastering myself. This mastery was not a destination, but a continuous journey. It required constant vigilance, a daily recommitment to principles forged in fire. The market never ceased its attempts to pull me back into the old patterns, to tempt me with fleeting gains. But now, I had an internal compass, an unshakable core built from disciplined inaction. This core allowed me to navigate the ceaseless currents, to remain anchored when others were swept away. My perception sharpened. I saw the market not as a series of random events, but as a grand, unfolding drama, where patience was the ultimate predictor of endurance. The true power of cash as a position became undeniable. It was my strategic reserve, my capacity for decisive action when the truly significant opportunities materialized. Without it, I was merely a bystander, forced to watch from the sidelines, or worse, forced into desperate, suboptimal trades. With it, I became a predator, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. This waiting was not passive. It was an active, intense form of engagement. My mind was constantly analyzing, filtering, preparing. Every quiet moment was an investment in future precision. I understood that the market rewards patience, not urgency. It rewards those who are willing to let go of the need for constant gratification, who can embrace the discomfort of dormancy. This discomfort was once my enemy. Now, it was a familiar companion, a signal that I was aligned with the deeper rhythms of the market, not its superficial fluctuations. The noise, the incessant chatter of news and sentiment, faded into the background. I listened for the signal, the clear, unambiguous message that spoke of true confluence, of an undeniable edge. This was the essence of Livermore's wisdom, distilled through my own crucible of experience. It was not merely a tactic, it was a philosophy, a way of being. It allowed me to transform my relationship with risk, from one of fear to one of calculated respect. I no longer feared missing out, because I knew I was always preparing for something better. My focus shifted from what I could do to what I should do, and often what I should do was nothing at all. This disciplined inaction became my most formidable advantage, a silent strength that others rarely understood. It was a testament to the fact that true control lies not in constant intervention, but in strategic withdrawal, in the profound wisdom of knowing when not to act. This mastery was not a destination, but a continuous journey. It required constant vigilance, a daily recommitment to principles forged in fire. The market never ceased its attempts to pull me back into the old patterns, to tempt me with fleeting gains. But now I had an internal compass, an unshakable core built from disciplined inaction. This core allowed me to navigate the ceaseless currents, to remain anchored when others were swept away. My perception sharpened. I saw the market not as a series of random events, but as a grand unfolding drama, where patience was the ultimate predictor of endurance. The true power of cash as a position became undeniable. It was my strategic reserve, my capacity for decisive action, when the truly significant opportunities materialized. Without it, I was merely a bystander, forced to watch from the sidelines, or worse, forced into desperate suboptimal trades. With it, I became a predator, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. This waiting was not passive. It was an active, intense form of engagement. My mind was constantly analyzing, filtering, preparing. Every quiet moment was an investment in future precision. I understood that the market rewards patience, not urgency. It rewards those who are willing to let go of the need for constant gratification, who can embrace the discomfort of dormancy. This discomfort was once my enemy. Now it was a familiar companion, a signal that I was aligned with the deeper rhythms of the market, not its superficial fluctuations. The noise, the incessant chatter of news and sentiment, faded into the background. I listened for the signal, the clear, unambiguous message that spoke of true confluence, of an undeniable edge. This was the essence of Livermore's wisdom, distilled through my own crucible of experience. It was not merely a tactic. It was a philosophy, a way of being. It allowed me to transform my relationship with risk, from one of fear to one of calculated respect. I no longer feared missing out, because I knew I was always preparing for something better. My focus shifted from what I could do to what I should do, and often, what I should do was nothing at all. This disciplined inaction became my most formidable advantage, a silent strength that others rarely understood. It was a testament to the fact that true control lies not in constant intervention, but in strategic withdrawal, in the profound wisdom of knowing when not to act. And thus, the ceaseless battle within transformed into a quiet understanding. The ache, the gnawing pressure that once demanded immediate action, had finally receded. It was replaced by a profound sense of calm, a clarity born from countless hours of patient observation, and the discipline to act only when the market unequivocally presented its hand. The market's temptations still arose, but they no longer held sway. My internal enemy, the impulse to constantly do something, had been disarmed. I had found my anchor, my unshakable foundation in the truth that cash is not merely capital, but a position of immense power, a strategic advantage. It offered me the freedom to choose, the strength to wait, and the conviction to act decisively when the moment truly called for it. In the end, the greatest lesson was not about reading charts or predicting movements, but about mastering the self, about understanding that true opportunity reveals itself to those who possess the patience to embrace the stillness. Therefore, my journey from impulsive reaction to deliberate inaction culminated in a profound liberation, a consistent peace of mind, and a deep respect for the market's timeless lessons. This wisdom, hard-won and deeply felt, is a truth I now live by. If this perspective resonates, if you too seek this clarity, consider liking this video, leaving a comment with your own insights, and subscribing to Livermore Mind for more reflections on the enduring principles of market mastery.